Hello, fight fans. It is Monday, July 10th, 2017. This is the Monday Morning Analyst here on MMAfighting.com. My name is Luke Thomas. I am the host of this podcast, among many other things in the MMA world. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. A couple events we're going to get to today. The Ultimate Fighter 25 finale, which took place on Friday in Las Vegas, and then UFC 213, which took place on Saturday. Three parts of the podcast, as always. We sort of have an overview of the weekend. We go into something in particular in the second segment, and then look ahead at what's coming up in the third. Now, something I want to try a little bit differently here. I do a post-fight show on my own YouTube channel. Not always, but sometimes. And because I was in Las Vegas for Friday and Saturday, well, I came back Saturday morning, but certainly I was there for Friday. I was at the Ultimate Fighter 25 finale. Here's what I'm thinking. On days or for events where I don't do a post-fight show, I'm going to use the Monday Morning Analyst to go through every single fight like I normally do. But because I did post-fight shows for both of those events, I'm not sure I see the point, but I still want to go over some details now that I've had a little bit more time to think about it. And of course, we're still going to do our second segment as normal and our third segment as normal. But here's what I'm saying. Let's start with UFC 213, and I'll put my post-fight show for that right up here. You can take a look at that. I went on for an hour there, really in-depth into everything we saw. But I'm not going to do everything I said all over again here. There's no real point to it. And I want to keep this podcast kind of short and snappy, explanatory, but, I want the pace to move. So I don't want to waste any more of your time explaining that. You can check out my post-fight show for UFC 213 right up here. Now, that being said, let's get to some of these details. This took place, of course, at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada for a gate of 2.4 million with an attendance of 12,834. So, decent gate, not a great attendance, but, we all know what happened. And, of course, if you want some further thoughts on Amanda Nunes versus Valentina Shevchenko, or what was supposed to be that, the post-fight show for that. Now, Robert Whittaker versus Yoel Romero. He wins 48-47 on all three judges' scorecards. So, in the second segment, we're going to take a look at the takedown defense of Robert Whittaker, because to me, that was central to everything. And we'll do that there. But let me just say this. I made a point on that post-fight show that if you look at his game, Robert Whittaker's game, it's modular. In the sense that you can build stuff. It's got a real basic foundation, but by basic I don't mean simplistic. What I mean is very core, foundational, central. But at its core, it's not overly complicated. But what it allows him to do is to build pieces on top of it that make it complicated. And so I went back and I watched his fight against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson from UFC 170. It was a fight at 170 pounds, but UFC 170 was the event back in 2014, and you would not believe. It doesn't look like a radically different game. It just looks like a significantly more minimalist game. He has, over time, and of course he changed weight classes, and he got better generally, but he has just added pieces over time to the point now where he's got something really formidable. I went back and I watched, and to me, the real key to this was that he stood at kickboxing range, because I think he knew at that range the takedown threat was minimalized. It's not exactly, or minimized, I should say. It's not exactly that, Yoel Romero can't hurt you there, but the chances are fairly minimal. And it allowed him to leap into position, so he would fake with the left, go with the right. He'd fake low, come with the left hook. He'd fake with the left, come with the teep. He'd fake with the right, come with the left uppercut. He was really at that range able to leap into space as he needed to, and over time just made things more and more and more confusing for Yoel Romero. That's ultimately what sort of caught him. Romero doing a great job taking out the knees early, but not really sticking with it, which I don't really understand. He went back in the fourth round, and he saw that the knee was buckled, but he never kept attacking it. And not only with that side kick, but the inside and the outside leg kicks. He's got powerful leg kicks, and he really just sort of got away from it. I don't know that I understand why. It was not that he was necessarily heavily countered when he was doing that. There was a very bad tactical error on the part of Yoel Romero. So a bit of a problem there. And as I said, we'll take a look at the takedown defense in the second segment with some help with some visual cues. But really just an incredible performance by Robert Whittaker. I'm very with the kind of game that he has, where he's got a real solid foundation that he's able to add tricks to, because he's got this really sort of open style. boy, he is going to be a handful in a couple of years. And, he's supposed to fight Michael Bisping. I don't really know where Michael Bisping is better than Robert Whittaker. Now, he's certainly, I think, a tougher guy, right? I mean, Michael Bisping has been, and I don't mean to say that Robert Whittaker is not a very tough. He fought with a jacked up knee. What I'm saying is, in terms of demonstrating perseverance in competitive experience, Michael Bisping is very, very, very hard to put away and very, very hard to, you can land on him, but, arguably Anderson Silva nearly KO'd him in the third round, and that fourth round was the best round of that entire fight for Michael Bisping when they fought. So very, very perseverant guy, and that can do a lot for you. I mean, that's how he's able to win a lot of close fights. So in that sense, I don't know that Whittaker has shown that kind of mettle. Maybe he has it. We just don't know that it exists necessarily. We do know that it exists for Michael Bisping, but in terms of that modular game where he's got a lot of trickery, he's got a lot of speed, he's got a lot of youth, he doesn't have a lot of miles, he doesn't take a lot of damage, he didn't take hardly, his knee got jacked up, but in terms of his face and his brain, and even his body, the rest of it, so waist up, didn't take a lot of damage in this contest. The guy's, he is going to be a handful for absolutely everybody. So really looking forward to seeing how his career progresses. Overeem defeating Werdum, 128-28 and then 229-28. One of the judges had the third round 10-8 for Alistair Overeem. I've gone over this before. I don't really know what people really expect from judging. I do think there's a rational universe where, there can be things so crazy outside of it that we can have real room to criticize. But in this particular case, I don't think we've reached that place. 10-8, I wouldn't agree with necessarily, but I don't think that it's wild. It doesn't really matter because the judges still had it. First two rounds, Overeem. Last round, Werdum. We still up 2-1. So in the end, I suppose the right guy won. You can have a debate about whether or not the first and the third rounds should be equivalently scored, and that's fine too. But again, these guys are asked to make rough draft choices with limited or no, in many cases, technological aids with their own biases, both internal and then spatial biases and spatial limitations. I really don't know what people expect. I'm not saying you have to agree with every call. Call them like you see them. Try to make a rational case for it. But just understand there's a series of rational cases that can be made. And once you fundamentally accept that, quibbling about scorecards often becomes, I think, a pretty futile exercise. Curtis Blaydes defeating Daniel Omilanchuk 30-27 across the board. Anthony Pettis defeating Jim Miller 30-27 across the board. What a dramatically improved performance from Anthony Pettis. This was a guy saying that an increase in weight training. I asked him about this specifically. What will this do for you? What it'll do is, he said, it enabled him to get underhooks and peel people off of him in a way that he hadn't had before. You go back to, like, say, the Eddie Alvarez or the Eddie Alvarez fight where, he's all over Anthony Pettis, right? That was a big problem. He was just getting sort of wrestled to death. What were the final scores in that one? I want to see that real quick, if we can find that out. I believe it was a unanimous decision loss, if I'm not mistaken. Just want to verify that real fast. Let's see here. Yeah. Oh, no, split. It was split. But nevertheless, as you can see, that can make all the difference. So I really thought he looked a lot better this time. A little shy at first about pulling the trigger, which made me a little bit nervous, but then really kind of opened up, especially with his kicks. And obviously, it turns out I think he injured his hand, so that kind of explains why he was not quite as active with that. And look, I got to say, I mentioned it before, I'll say it again. He has superb MMA jiu-jitsu, real functional, real technical. I wouldn't say he has a very hugely diverse arsenal of guard passes. He doesn't have a hugely diverse arsenal of submissions, but he's got great guard retention. He's got really threatening hips. He can get his hips high. He can turn them in the direction they need to go. He doesn't, Jim Miller didn't pass his guard. He passed Jim Miller's guard. Jim Miller didn't offer up any real submission threats. He offered up real submission threats. I don't know if he was very close, but that he was forcing, real evasive action on the part of Jim Miller. Man, never forget, we always talk about the striking and how flashy it is. He keeps presenting himself as a striker, and he is. And I don't think he should necessarily go to his wrestling, but it's one of the better aces in the hole that you will see for an elite prize fighter. Rob Font defeating Douglas Silva de Andrade at 4:36 of the second round with a modified Marcelo team. Rob Font is good, and you didn't really see it in the John Lineker fight because it's John Lineker, but you can see it now. This kid has a lot of ability, just a total diversity in the way in which he can approach striking, fluid combinations, moving forward, marrying things with submissions, and just great timing on everything. When to jump on a choke and when not to. Lots of stuff like that. Really good. Which brings us to Alexei Oleinik defeating Travis Browne at 3:44 of the second round. Now, I talked about this at length on my post-fight show, but I want to bring it up again because I keep seeing this debate happening, and I'm going to put my foot down on this one. UFC President Dana White said after the event at the press conference, the post-fight press conference, that he believed Browne should retire. I echo that sentiment. I don't know that it's the most required thing, but I don't think it'd be necessarily a bad call. Travis Browne has looked increasingly bad fight over fight for the last 4 of them. Certainly you could make a case even in his wins that they've been a little bit iffy. But this was the real problem with me. I went back and I watched this fight a number of times, certainly the very end there. Again, the weird wobbly legs. I don't understand what's happening there. I don't know if he's got balance issues or some kind of knee issues, but something doesn't look right. I went back and I watched the Stefan Struve fight. None of that was there. At least very little of it. It was hard to detect a similar pattern, so something has happened physically to him. And maybe he hasn't told us and he's still able to pass physicals, but something's off, and I can't quite figure out exactly what it is, but it's not right. But that's not why he lost this contest. Here was the problem to this, and I made this point before. Sometimes you can get a choke that is so tight, that is so ridiculous, that it can really put you away very fast, and you don't necessarily have to have proper positioning on it because the squeeze can be so Herculean that it doesn't matter. I point to the Carlos Newton bulldog choke of Pat Miletich as a great example of this. You know, there are actions you can take if someone gets you in a bulldog choke positionally to move around, to pick them up, to do all kinds of things. But if the choke is on so tight, and it was in an instant, right, quickly, they were in a transition, he snatched it up, and you can just see all the muscles flexing on Carlos Newton. Boy, he really had it on him. And Miletich tapped because the strangulation was so immediate and so powerful that even though there were things positionally, because you're not controlling the rest of his body, you're just controlling that neck and head, it didn't matter. So that those things do exist. I don't think this is one of them. Now, everyone at American Top Team I've talked to says Oleinik has a squeeze like you wouldn't believe. I don't doubt. I don't doubt that by the time that squeeze was on, it was very, very tight, or that he wouldn't have gone out. Not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am suggesting is 2 things. Number one, for a choke like that, if there is any positional weakness in the structure, you can fight it. And you see that there is a weakness to it. He is slumped off to the side, Oleinik, which means the left shoulder of Browne was touching the mat. If your left shoulder is touching the mat, folks, there is a way to get out of that. Not a guarantee that necessarily you'll get out of that, but it's at least worth pursuing. It's not complete and total checkmate. It's just not. Okay? Total checkmate would be Demian Maia having your neck, his hand behind your head, chin tucked. So this can't be peeled and this can't be peeled. And let's say he's got a body triangle and you're on the wrong side of the body triangle. And he's going to bow you out. That's checkmate. There's nothing you can really do because you can't fight the hands. You can't fight the legs. You can't really move your hips. You can do almost nothing. It's basically you're locked into position. So the choke is tight, but it's aided by control of the body and proper alignment of your body on theirs. It's a lot of conditions, usually. There are exceptions, but usually that have to be put in place for that to happen. This did not have that. The choke can be tight and the positioning on the body can still offer ways out of that. The way out would have been hand fighting, which Browne doesn't even do. And you go back and you look, nothing here is protecting the hand of Oleinik. He's on the bicep, but the hand is here on top of the forehead of Browne. That is easy to pull, and I don't care how strong he is. You're not going to get choked with one hand behind your back. It might be uncomfortable, and you might have to fight a little bit, and you might have to, that may take some experience. But Travis Browne's an elite prize fighter. He's been in bad spots before. The guy was training with, Josh Barnett, for crying out loud. I guarantee he's been in positions like that. If you can fight the hand and they're slumped off to the side, it's going to hurt your waist, but that allows you to slide off at an angle through the left shoulder that direction to get your hips. All you need is just a little bit of space. And if you can get a shoulder and then a shoulder blade all the way down, man, I'm telling you, it absolutely loosens the choke. The problem for me was that, not that the choke wasn't necessarily tight, or to borrow from Kurt Osiander, that he didn't really fight it that hard, or by the time he's already on your back, or at least 2/3 of your back, choking you, that it's not tight. To borrow from Osiander, you effed up a long time ago. To me, it was the lack of fire that Travis Browne showed. Everyone wants to say, well, the choke was tight. Lots of chokes are tight. You can still get out of them. You can get out of tight chokes, especially when it's positionally not aligned 100% as it needs to be. I don't know why this is controversial. If you're slumped off to the side, if someone has a rear naked choke on you and one of your shoulders is touching the mat and they're scissoring their legs like this, which means you can push, hand fight, or hand fight and push, whatever direction you want to go, and slide your hips up and in the direction out, this is a solvable problem. Now, what is likely to have happened was that Oleinik would have taken mount. And once they take mount, you have to anticipate them taking mount and then do an elbow escape and get half guard or something, right? So it's not like you're just going to get out of it and all of a sudden stand up. You're going to go from a bad position to another bad position, but at least you stop the choke. The real takeaway for me from this fight here was the utter lack of fire from Travis Browne. He just let the rising water drown him, rather than trying to swim through and find an exit. And I'm not saying it was easy to go find an exit. Yeah, you got to fight, man. You got to fight really, really hard. But that's what prize fighting's all about at an elite level. At an elite level, you should not see a competitor do that. And to me, that was a red flag. It was a real red flag. Travis Browne, internally, in here, and in his heart, I know he's whatever else you think of him as a character, I know he's a very talented fighter. I know he knows how to get out of these things. And you saw him try to hit a switch on the takedown, and he just kind of gave up a little bit. It was a lack of fire. It wasn't a lack of opportunity. And maybe the opportunity was big. Not this big, but this big. But that's enough to get out. That is enough to get out for the person who wants to get out. And I made this point before. You think Joseph Benavidez is going to get choked with someone where one of his shoulder blades is touching the mat? Not on your life. Not on your life. That guy will fight until he dies to get out of a choke like that. It will be very hard to put him away like that. Now, granted, it's a different weight class, and scrambling's a little bit more naturally occurring, but I'm just pointing out, if you think, well, that choke was on and there was nothing he can do, yes, by the time he let it get that bad, it was very tight. So I'm sure if he had stayed in there, maybe he would have gone out. But the point being was, number one, he didn't fight really all that hard to keep himself out of that position. And B, even in that position, there were some opportunities to pursue evasive actions. And he just didn't pursue them. That is my problem. That was really a red flag for me. And I don't really know what's next for him. But I can absolutely understand why Dana White said he should consider retirement. Chad Laprise defeating Brian Camozzi with a vicious body shot at 127 of round 3. Thiago Santos stopping Gerald Mearshart at 204 of the second round, calling out Gegard Mousasi. Not a whole lot of luck after today's news. Bilal Muhammad defeating Jordan Meehan at 29-28 on 2 scorecards and 30-27 on another. Jordan Meehan, this is a similar point I made to him before. Well, it's not exactly the same as the Travis Browne scenario, but you know that he's got 100% of skills. Not that he can do everything, but he can do a lot of things. Like, let's say, just total up all his skills. It always feels like he's using 60 to 70% of them, never really 100. Whereas Bilal Muhammad, you feel like, puts the gas tank on E by the time the end of the third round comes. And so I think Jordan Meehan's a skilled guy. I don't know what kind of competitive fire he has left either. Cody Stamann defeating Terrion Ware, 230-27s, 129-28. Terrion Ware, really good, effective, accurate pinpoint boxing, but happening at a range where it allowed Stamann, who is a natural bantamweight, to get these huge takedowns. Doesn't necessarily do a whole lot with them, but got him long enough for it to matter, to disrupt the rhythm. And a pretty impressive debut for a guy who's not even a featherweight, who fought at featherweight. And then Trevin Giles defeating James Boknovic at 254 of the second round. Didn't like what I saw from Boknovic. Did like what I saw from Trevin Giles, including some vicious shoulder pressure on a crossface. But Boknovic just looked there was a major, major difference in athleticism here. Your bonuses went to Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero, and your performance of the night went to Rob Font and Chad Laprise. Now, that brings us to our second event, which happened the day before. I'm going sort of in backwards sequential order. The Ultimate Fighter 25 Redemption Finale, or UFC Fight Night. What do you want to call it? Well, I don't know if they call it a UFC Fight Night, but whatever. This took place also at the T-Mobile Arena. Not great numbers. In attendance of 6,308 for a total gate of 432,000. Not awesome. Your main event, what can you really say? Justin Gaethje taking on Michael Johnson at 448, and he wins via TKO at the second round. This is one of the best fights I've ever seen, certainly in the UFC. One of the better debuts. Look, today's big news about Bellator signing Gegard Mousasi, and it is a big news, and who could say otherwise? But we don't talk enough about some UFC acquisitions that they made. Marlon Moraes, first fight against Sun didn't necessarily go all that great. I mean, it couldn't have gone much better for Justin Gaethje. Yes, he got rocked a couple times, but I mean, in terms of building a legend, building a star, that was an incredible performance, which got mentioned, by the way, at UFC 213. And inevitably, he won because most of that fight was just fought on Justin Gaethje's terms, right? Whose fight did that look like? Did it look like a Michael Johnson fight, or did it look like a Justin Gaethje fight? Now, there were times where Gaethje got a little bit greedy in the pocket, and Michael Johnson's ability to throw combinations aided him, but he was never really checking the leg kicks. He got pushed back way too often. He wasn't moving laterally enough. And as a consequence, he was just able to do, Justin Gaethje, what he's always able to do. An incredible dirty boxer, vicious when he gets you along the fence line. Guys want to clinch and they think they're far away because they're pushing at full arm's distance. That's perfect for him because then he just wrecks you with his leg kicks, which he did to Palomino a number of times. I mean, Justin Gaethje, there's a guy who's openly stated he doesn't care about brain damage. This is a reason why the sport needs to be regulated, but this is also the reason why he is just so phenomenal to watch and why he's such an acquisition for the UFC. Fan-friendly style, a little bit better on the microphone than you might imagine, and in the best weight class in all of MMA. So there's so many interesting fights you can match him up against. You could do Pettis, you could do, presumably, Nate Diaz. We'll see what happens with Tony Ferguson, Conor McGregor, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Do any of those versus Justin Gaethje sound bad? And yeah, those guys might meet him. Conor's left hand might sleep him, and Khabib might out-wrestle him. I don't know. But it was great matchmaking to match somebody up who's a more polished striker, but a more committed striker. Johnson's not really going to wrestle you. And it was phenomenal. Total star-making performance. I'm not saying that this guy's going to go headline pay-per-views and sell 700,000 buys from here on out, but this is about as good as you can get from starting your UFC career. Phenomenal. And something to be said for some guys out there who are watching, they want to get to the UFC right away. Maybe you don't get to the UFC right away. Maybe you work on your craft a little bit. Maybe you build up a bit of a star, get a bigger paycheck, get signed as a top free agent acquisition from another organization after you've had some time away. And by the time you get to the UFC, maybe you're ready for the top competition. You've already got a bunch of money, and relatively speaking anyway, and you can make a big splash. Now, we know some guys have tried that and not done all that well. Hector Lombard might be one of them, but boy, it worked out real nicely for Justin Gaethje. Jesse Taylor defeating Diego Lima at 43 seconds of the second round. Jesse Taylor doing what Jesse Taylor does, take the back, get the choke. A little bit more clever with his game. His takedowns come a little bit better. He's got better chain wrestling. He's got better entries on his chokes than he used to. So it's the same game, but better, but it's a pretty effective game. Jakar Close defeating Mark Diakese. Split decision, 29-28, 28-29, 29-28. This is my big takeaway from Mark Diakese. And then, you can check out, I did another also, of course, post-fight show for the Ultimate Fighter 25 finale, which you can check out up here. But the big takeaway for me was that the guy obviously has a tremendous amount of athletic gifts, still has some wrestling issues to work on, and still has some fight, what do you want to call it, selection issues to work on. Shot selection. Throwing a lot of big athletic kicks that put him out of position against a wrestle grinder. Bad choice to make. It puts you out of bad position. It puts you at a deficit. They didn't land, and it just constantly means you have to fight out of a positional deficit when they don't land. It almost reminds me of John Jones, where John Jones used to throw these crazy spinning things, and he still can do it a little bit, but he's gotten a little more conventional. You might say he's gotten boring, but he's gotten better too. Certainly it's interesting and fun for us if a guy's throwing wild spinning kicks, but if it means you gave up 2, 3, 4 takedowns, or at least you have to fight out of them, it's not great. I think he can beat a lot of guys, but he needs to edit some of the shot selection here. Jared Cannonier defeating Nick Rorik at 2:08 of the third round. Rorik, absolute chin on this guy, and he was training for the Tuesday Night Contender Series. But Jared Cannonier got something of a tune-up fight with this contest. Total maniac, this guy, Jared Cannonier. But as you can see, absolute dynamo striker, total physical presence in the octagon, can wrestle against the fence. There are some defensive wrestling issues, but they didn't get tested here. And this was a good comeback fight after Glover Teixeira. Brad Tavares defeating Elias Theodorou, unanimous decision. Talk about, I think it was a third-round peek out that Tavares hit. That was phenomenal. I got a retweet from Joe Lazon because I was blown away by it. I'm talking instinctual, quick, athletic, worked perfectly. Brad Tavares' wrestling has really come a long way, and I love seeing stuff that you see in regular college or freestyle wrestling about reversing position brought to the octagon. I love seeing MMA-specific stuff, but I also love seeing stuff borrowed from other sports that also works really well here, and he hit just an absolutely sensational, perfectly timed peek out, and it may have made the difference in that third round. He needed to absolutely be on top and not give up position, and it worked. And Brad Tavares, man, I don't know that he's going to be a title contender anytime soon, but he has another guy's really sharpened his game a lot, and I loved seeing that peek out in the third round. Jordan Johnson defeating Marcel Fortuna at 29-28 across the board. Angela Hill defeating Ashley Yoder 30-27 across the board. Ashley Yoder might be, Angela Hill, might be one of the most improved fighters in the UFC. Going to Invicta was fantastic for her, as it has been for many women. Getting some of the, the kinks in her game ironed out. She plays distance better. Her shot selection is better. Her trickery is better. Still some takedown defense issues, but she's worked on those too, but she has what I would call unorthodox challenges to them. I would like to see her still add some more orthodox things, just which you'll see from Robert Whittaker in the next segment. That can make a big difference. So, not saying she hasn't made improvement there. Absolutely she has, but a couple more paces to go in the takedown defense department. But in terms of her offense on her striking, it's so polished, it's so measured, it's still yet so effective. I'm really kind of impressed by what Angela Hill has been able to become, and she's got a really bright future. James Krause defeating Tom Galicchio. Tom Galicchio, 30-27 across the board. He's just getting torn up on the feet, man. Robotic, lunging into places. Krause was just watching him and popping him and turning. It was hard to watch over time. CB Dalloway defeating Ed Herman, 29-28, 2 29-27s. Dude could barely stand after that. And Ed Herman, by the way, been on a bit of a losing streak here. I want to see where he's at with this. Let me see. Ed Herman. Yeah, he's lost 3 of his last 4. He's in a bit of a pickle here. Tisha Torres with a sensational back take against Juliana Lima. Rear naked choke, 53 seconds of the second round, getting her first stoppage win. We talked about this before, again, on my post-fight show, but I'm seeing more and more guys or ladies, just fighters, using back takes to challenge takedowns. They'll go for a leg. Somebody will. They'll try and turn. That brings someone around the corner, and they'll use that to either position them around or roll through or take the back. Taking the back is hard. In pure jiu-jitsu, you don't see a lot of guys, take down, pass the side, go to mount. It can be very long and laborious to do that. They're using a lot of leg entanglements and rollovers to come out the backside. Berimbolo is a very common example. We don't necessarily see that in MMA, but taking the back off a failed takedown, that is something you're seeing a lot more of. Tisha Torres doing a really good, and that was also partly a scramble too, but I'm saying you're seeing more and more of that. And then Gray Maynard defeating Teruto Ishihara. Maybe the best performance from Gray Maynard in a while, but I don't know that we saw, maybe the bottom hasn't dropped out, but I'm not seeing any radical return to greatness. And then, of course, your fight of the night, what else? Gaethje versus Johnson. Performance of the night, Gaethje, double bonus for him, and Tisha Torres, well-deserved. Fighter of the card at UFC 213, got to be Robert Whittaker. Fighter of the card for Ultimate Fighter 25, got to be Justin Gaethje. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go to the second segment now. Take a look at what Robert Whittaker did in terms of takedown defense. Yes, there was great shot selection and distance management and fakes and feints. I remember I said he would fake a left and throw a right, fake a right and throw a left, fake a low, come it high, fake it left, throw a head kick on the right side. All different things had you all confused. But the takedown defense was really what saved him in the end. Let's look at that now. So here we are. Robert Whittaker defeating Yoel Romero, and we're not going to go into every single round. We only have slides for 3 of the rounds, pardon me. But here's what I want you to pay attention to. How did he beat Jacare's wrestling? Because Jacare's got awesome wrestling too. If you go back and you recall, number 1, it's of course just having good hips, good timing on the sprawl. It was also about breaking the hands, making sure the hands never got together. And what's interesting about it in this contest is he doesn't really do a great job of that. A little bit in some cases. But he actually has to fight his way out of that and still manages to do a great job. So even if Jacare had gotten his hands together, it wouldn't have been necessarily the biggest threat. Although what's interesting about this contest is in not being able to break the hands, he gets something else right, which is making sure his base is properly under him and his hips are facing the mat, right? Here's what I mean. Watch how he gets through a lot of these things. It's real basic, but it's fundamental. I mean, the basics win fights, kids. I mean, I don't know how else to tell you. He's not doing something magical. In fact, when he tries to really out-wrestle Romero for wrestling for wrestling, he doesn't do all that well. But when he does slow, methodical, climbs his way, metaphorically speaking, out of bad positions, he does great. So let's watch what happens here. All right, he's going to flash the left. Remember, I told you before, he'd flash the left and go with the right, or he'd flash the right and go with the left. A lot of different trickery here because the entry all looked the same. He's got outside foot positioning. Let's watch what happens, right? Throws a right, and Romero's going to duck under this, and you can see which direction he's probably going to go as a consequence, which leg he's going to grab, what hip he's going to grab, right? Boom. He's going to go behind this leg and around this hip. Let's see how he does it. He's going to look at him. Look at Romero's almost off balance, but he's trying to turn him in this direction, right? He wants to get him not going necessarily in a blast double back, but on an axis. And there he goes. Turns into him. And you can see what is Whittaker already doing? Fighting the hands. Now, the hands wouldn't go together here necessarily anyway, but he's always got a hand on a wrist. Immediate response. Doesn't want to make sure, he wants to make sure that Romero's hands cannot get clasped together. But it doesn't matter because Romero is just a goddamn tank and picks him up. Now, I want you to pay attention to this slide. This is my favorite slide. Now, Romero is a little loose here. Romero just dumps him to the mat. But you cannot take what's about to happen for granted. Yes, it's not the kind of tight control positioning. It's more just an athletic flip you and turn you, and I'll just get on top because I'm more athletic. And that's ultimately a big problem that Romero makes in all of his wrestling. I think it's a common freestyle thing where these guys get these big, heavy takedowns. They turn someone on their back. The guy has to turn for parterre, and they just get the 2 points or whatever. My point being is there are guys who have tighter takedowns where, yes, they'll follow you to the mat, but they'll do it in a much more controlled way so there's not space between you. Look at their space between them. But still, nevertheless, this is what I don't want you to take for granted. Look at the back of Whittaker. It's flat on the mat. He refuses to accept this position. And in instinct, what is he going to do? He is going to roll to his base immediately. He must have drilled this 1,000 times. If he takes you down on some big athletic takedown and it's a little loose positionally, I mean, look at that. It's a little loose positionally, but it's, it's strong and it's quick. As soon as your back touches the mat, pretend you're getting electrocuted, because what does he do? Immediately rolls to his base. Immediately rolls. I cannot respect this enough. It looks simple. It looks like something anyone could do. It is not. It is not. It is not. If somebody who's a really good wrestler does this to you, you are not going to know what to do. Your instinct is going to be to turn and face them, or to maybe, cover up. It's not going to be to keep rolling through the momentum. Remember, he doesn't roll this way. He rolls with it, like that, and then gets up to his base. And this is the part in the game of Romero that causes him problems. Unlike Jacare, which would be a very difficult thing, Romero's not much of a choking threat. Now, you can't ignore it, but you don't necessarily have to think you're fighting Jacare. And so you're able to get on your base and get on all fours if you need to, because Romero probably doesn't want to take the chance of taking your back and choking you out, because he's not really going to be that strong at it. So this enables Whittaker to get to his feet. Now, he went up with the wrong leg here, but that's okay. He fixes that later. Now he switches. Now he goes up on the outside leg is the one. It's sort of counterintuitive, but that's the one you want. So he stands here, and look what he does. He's fighting the hands at all times, and he's going to sneak that elbow in and across. Rather than this being underneath, he sneaks that arm through, which is going to enable him to get his back turned like that. Right? Hard to control a guy like this. This is not much of a harness. You want to be around the waist, super tight. These things about, even if you can't break this grip, I literally can't physically separate your hands, it's hard to keep your elbows sucked to your ribs and a hard grip on this enough to prevent them squirming underneath. That's the sort of trick here. Maybe I can't physically unlock the grip, but the grip might move out away from your body, and I can slide a hand underneath, so I don't need to break it. I'm just going to get my body in between it in a way where you're just going to have to let it go because it doesn't serve any functional purpose for you. And that's exactly, watch him drag the elbow across, what he does here as this photo renders. And you'll notice Romero has control of his far side wrist here, right? It's hard to tell from this photo. Let me see if I can get a better slide. No, you can't really tell here. Let's see if we can look at this one. Yeah, right here you can see See how he's got Whittaker's wrist here? But what Whittaker does smartly is he knows it doesn't matter necessarily. If he can get this elbow across and face him, it's going to extend out Romero's arm. And at the end, because you have to imagine, Romero's wrist has to internally rotate, right? It becomes weak as it gets extended. It's better for you if you can keep it nice and tight close to you. The wrist almost straightens. It gets turned out, and as a consequence, it gets loose and therefore loses functional value. See, it's much worse for him out there. It allows him to straighten, and he can sort of get duck underneath and separate. So he didn't do it all at once. Look, I mean, we go back. When was he on his back here? He's on his back at 257. It took him a solid, 15 seconds or so to get out of this. Right? Took him a little bit. Not quite 15, but, it didn't happen automatically. He didn't just jump to his feet. He climbed out of it. And he did it by understanding hips got to face the mat. Probably not a choking threat. If you can't break the hands, find a way to dig for an underhook. And there's a method to his underhooking that we're going to watch here as well. All right, 30 seconds left in the first round. What's he going to do? Remember, he starts everything on the outside. A couple times they clashed internally where, a guy would jump, he would jam a punch accidentally. And so no one really landed here. They kind of had a clash of heads, but let's see what happens. Right? What's he going to do? Now, this looks like he's got him almost dead to rights. Two hands behind the knees here. This were Jordan Burroughs. You'd be going for a ride. Let's see what happens. Right? He's going to pick up one. He's going to knee tap him. Probably take him something like this direction, I'm guessing. Not straight back. Right? He's going to take him at an angle. Why? I can walk forward easily. I can't walk backwards easily, but I can brace myself from walking backwards easily. If you walk side to side and then I block you, you don't have the same kind of musculature to stop it, and I can just rotate you over that direction, right? Very simple. So what does he do? This is a weakness, again, in Romero's wrestling. Romero's trying to bully him over, but look where Romero's hands were here. He needed to keep this here to turn him over, to block him, but he lets it go to hand plant as Whittaker drives this underhook, what am I saying? This whizzer. A whizzer is an overhook of an underhook, and he's got it overhooked on the leg here, but essentially on inside control here. That's what a whizzer is. It's an overhook of an underhook, right? And he's going to drive his hips over, which forces Romero to hand plant and allows him to hand plant. And what does he do? He keeps that heavy pressure while he angles out and walks over one more time. Look at that. Romero's trying to come around the backside, but it's a little too late now. So he's able to stand. Now he's got an underhook, and now he can at least face him in underhook and begin to work his way out of it. That is what I'm talking about. Smart, effective wrestling. Get your hips. Look at his hips. Which direction are they facing? They're facing the mat. Here, who's facing the mat? Romero. He needed to keep that angle, and he did it because this hard whizzer, his turning his hips, let's say this direction, he's going to rotate him this direction, blink, it's going to force him to hand plant. While he hand plants, he's going to crawl over quickly, just so long he can get to the cage. The cage actually was a major benefit to Robert Whittaker here. And the reason why is because, you'll see later on, wrestling for wrestling, it doesn't really work for him. He cannot out-wrestle as such in the open mat. Like in this area, he cannot out-wrestle Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero might take a bad shot, but wrestling for wrestling, you're not going to beat him there. But against the fence, he can do a lot. It was a major benefit for him. And you're going to see him actually retreat to the fence because he knows when it comes to MMA wrestling, there's almost nothing Romero can do to stop him. Let's take a look at round two. Okay, here's round two. About 3:47 into the first round, or I'm sorry, to the beginning of the frame. And let's see what happens here. All right, you see him, he's going to fake out, right? He's going to fake feint, and he might come right and fake left. He might come left and fake right. He might come low left and fake high left. We've been over that. Let's see what he does. All right, he's going to fake left, and you see he's going to bomb on him with the right. But Romero reads it and ducks it. Romero did a good job of this. I have to say, Romero's anticipation of which side ultimately Whittaker was going to strike from was really good. He didn't necessarily counter it with strikes, but he at times was able to counter it with wrestling. And this was very, very strong. Boom. Catches him. This is a beautifully timed double leg from Yoel Romero, and he's got him dead to rights. Ear to the hip, hands clasped, underneath the rear end, shoulder to your hips. you're not going to stop this one. It's borderline impossible to stop this one, right? And of course, he doesn't. He gets taken down, and Romero finishes it, scooping the leg, and then clubbing over the top of the shoulder against the head and neck to finish it. So you're not just going straight back, you're going at a little bit of an angle, which is why they end up sort of like this. They spin in this direction. Now, he doesn't get up easily. I'm not going to show you all the different parts of it. Let's just fast forward to where he tries to get up, and let's see what happens. So about a minute later, here he is. He's going to try and butterfly sweep. Here's the interesting part about this. This is a failed butterfly sweep. Why is it a failed butterfly sweep? I'll show you. Watch. He kicks him off here. He's going to rotate around the head, right? He's blocking this side, kind of barely. You see him hugging his ear? Because you remember what a sweep is. I have to block one side, I have to rotate it to you, and I have to elevate you to it to do it. And you can't rotate this direction. You have to rotate this direction. You see that? If you just rotate to the side, they can balance. And you got to imagine a guy like Yoel Romero has ridiculous balance. And when his hips are facing the mat, bro, his base is not to be trifled with. But here's what I love about it. It doesn't need to be a successful sweep for him to get something out of it. It would have been nice to get a sweep, and he didn't. So it's failed in that sense, and you'll see it here, right? And he kind of kicks through and leans to his shoulder, which is really the most important way to do it. But Romero kind of withdraws from it before it fully finishes, and he ends up here. Now, does that look like a good sweep to you? No, it's a failed sweep. But here's the best part about it. I mentioned it before. Now where is Robert Whittaker? Hips facing the mat, are they not? On all fours, are they not? Base under him, is it not? This is a much better position because you don't really believe that Romero's much of a choking threat. So what's he going to do? He is going to slowly climb back to his feet. Now, as this picture renders here, you'll see he's not going to really be able to break these hands. Well, let me go back, this picture looks stupid. He's going to climb to his feet here. And what's Romero doing? He's not really threatening the neck, and he knows he's not going to threaten the neck. That's just not what he does. So he's going to stand here. Now again, breaking these hands is not going to be very easy. Yoel Romero probably has an insane grip. But you can make him let it go, and there's other things you can do. So what's he going to do? Same thing we've talked about with Holly Holm, what she didn't do against Miesha Tate. Remember, from referee's position in college wrestling, a lot of people think if you're here, you just lean. Now, it's okay to do this for a second, but that the way to get out of this is to walk forward this way with your head over your hips. It is not. This will not go well for you. It's to lean back into him, drive your hips forward, and use that to break his hands. That's exactly what he does here. Leans back, hips forward, tries to break it. Here's the problem. He did all that right. The problem is, of course, Yoel Romero is going to have really hard grip to break. It's just not going to go for you. But it looks like he might have gotten it here. Let's see what happens here. Leaning against the fence. Nope, can't quite get it. But where is he now? Against the fence. A key part of this. Get to your base. Get on all fours. Climb the right way. If you can't break the hands, get an underhook. If you can't get the underhook, get to the fence where you are in a much more neutral wrestling position, MMA wrestling position, where the skill differential is not quite as great. It's going to be very hard to break those hands. But if I have a fence I can lean against, there's a lot I can do here, which is exactly what he does, right? Now you see Romero try and kick out the hand, kick out the leg. That's going to force a hand to come down, right? Because you have to restabilize the structure, all right? But Whittaker is still in this. He's still thinking. He's still trying to figure out what to do here. So you see Romero trying to kick out the legs again. And Whittaker's going to find a way to keep his balance under him. You know, Romero's a tough customer, though. He's not done. He's going to still try some things here. It's very interesting. But Whittaker, as long as he can find a fence line, there's a lot he can do. So what's he going to do? There it is. Look at that. See that? He's going to drive that elbow underneath. And this is what I love. It's not merely about getting the elbow inside, because of someone who's really strong, that still probably won't be enough. Watch what he does here. This to me is an amazing slide, because Romero has double underhooks here. But I mentioned before, even if you can't break their hands, if you can just get a little bit of space in between, you can wedge it. You don't have to break their hands. You're going to make them let go of that grip by what you're doing. Look at this. He didn't try and drive the elbow straight across. He drove the elbow down. You see that? It's easier to drive down than it is across. You got a little bit more space here than you do this way. Vertical drop, not lateral. He puts it in vertical, and that allows him to drag it across. Now he can get an underhook and be against the fence in a 50-50 position. This is great work by Robert Whittaker. Really great work. Okay? Now let's keep going. Yoel Romero's not done. Robert Whittaker says, I've got 50-50, but I really want to break these hands. If I don't break these hands, what am I going to do? So he decides he's going to try and walk. Now this is really nice by Yoel Romero. This was all initiated by Yoel Romero. Here's what he's going to do. He's going to push Whittaker forward. He's going to get his momentum going in this direction, and then he's going to do this, right? If you have someone who's standing in place, it's hard to get them to go down. But if I can get you moving, if I can get your weight going direction, there's things I can do to manipulate that to then get a takedown off of you, right? So he gets him moving into position, and then bink, kicks out the legs. This is nice by Yoel Romero. I got to give him credit. You know, he's obviously a very, very talented wrestler, and he's able to go and sort of get onto this position. But what does Robert Whittaker do again? Hips facing the mat, close to the fence, hands underneath him on his base. It's just academic. It's academic. So I'm just so impressed by how prepared Robert Whittaker was for this contest, right? What's he going to do? Stand with the outside leg, the one facing the hips. That's the correct one. We've been over that before. And what's he going to do? This looks like he's in trouble. There's that elbow wedging underneath. Look at how hard he cannot break the grip of Yoel Romero, period. He cannot break it, but he doesn't need to break it because he's just going to keep doing this. Look at that. Where's that elbow? It's not lateral. It's vertical. A vertical elbow, which he's going to use to slide around. And here he is, back to the fence. Now, you might say, well, Luke, here he is, still on the fence. How much better is this? Okay, he lost this round. I mean, no one would say he won the second round, but he didn't get taken down and overwhelmed, except for that maybe that 1 minute. He's fighting these off. And look, he's got an overhook and an underhook. This is 50-50 against the fence. He can do something with that. That's an okay position. That keeps you in the game. All right, and then at the very end here, 42 seconds left. Let's see what happens. All right, here he is. He's going to come low, which means he's probably going to come high, right? He's faking left to like the body. Let's see what he does. Or maybe he comes to the right hand. Let's see. Yep, comes high with the left. And this is, again, no one really gave Romero a lot of credit here. Romero did a really good job of anticipating the attacks of Whittaker and getting underneath them or out of the way of them, right? So here's what he does. He collapses into him again. Now, the timing on this is good. The position's not. He doesn't really have his weight under him. He's got his knee kind of down. If he's going to spring, it's going to be up. It's not going to be over or at a circle. So this is to Whittaker's benefit. And watch what Whittaker does pretty quickly. He'll go to the fence if he needs it. But if he doesn't need it, he doesn't really want to go there. So he drops his weight and turns against the fence line like this. Drops down. Romero comes back out. You can't really tell here, but he's going to come back out because he wants to turn the corner. But Whittaker won't let him. Gets up, throws a left hook, right? And then what am I saying? Let's go back to this. Throws a right hook. What am I saying? Throws a left. Romero gets underneath it again. Give credit to Yoel Romero. He did a really good job with this, right? And then, but this time, what happens here? You get the underhook from Robert Whittaker. Pretty great job. And then they go against the fence. And I think they end the round right about here. Oh, I think there's one more thing. Actually, again, credit to Yoel Romero. He does a really good job here. Watch this. So they're against the fence line, yes? Watch him. He's got Whittaker has double underhooks. Whittaker has double underhooks. Watch what Romero does. He yanks him off the fence, turns him. So remember, get him in motion. If someone's still, not a whole lot you can do here. But if I can get them in motion, and I can turn that motion in different directions, then I can hit an inside trip like this. And then last but not least, round 4. Round 3, there wasn't a lot. Round 5, there was some, but nothing new. Round 4, there was a fair amount of action. So let's go through those slides here right now. All right, so they're standing at distance. You can imagine, you know, what been over 1,000 times what Whittaker's doing. All right, he's going to lower his stance. Let's see here. Let's see what he does. All right, he's going to leap in with a right this time. And Romero, to his credit, slips it and gets out of the way. I got to say, I'm pretty impressed by Romero's anticipatory skills, right? And what's he going to do? He's going to get up under him. And now this looks pretty deep, right? Around the waist, around the leg. You're going to drive him against the backside of this hand. Whatever the direction the backside of his hand is facing, that's the way you're going to go. So let's see what happens, right? He decides, well, I can't get him to go that direction, so I'm going to spin around. And he spins, and he spins. So he's come all the way around now. Let's see where he goes. And he finally gets him down. But what is Whittaker doing? Hips facing, base under him on all fours. Let's see how he handles it, right? So he tries that same thing. He tries to do from the referee's position, the unofficial referee's position, tries to get his hips down and his weight back so he can turn into him. But it doesn't really work because he can't quite get, he kind of sinks his weight too far and he can't quite, he just doesn't have his weight under him enough to make a quick down and turn switch. He kind of just drops too far, which makes the turn impossible. So he can't really get away. You can see Romero breaks the hands, but just kind of follows him along. It's just, it wasn't enough on it, right? But he's still in this position. As long as he's here, he can work with that, as we've been over a bunch. So this is what he does this time. He's like, well, I can't sink my hips down and bring my weight back because Romero's just too good. Again, wrestling for wrestling here, you're not going to beat Yoel Romero. But what I can do is I can sort of, okay, he sees the fence. Aha, I can just walk right over to the fence. And Romero's going to follow because he's not much of a choking threat and he doesn't really know what else to do. So here, this was sought by Robert Whittaker. He wanted the fence because he knew if he could get a fence, he can get an underhook. If he can get an underhook, he can get separation. That's all he ever needed. So what does he do? He's already got an underhook. Now, Romero's trying to do different things to lean on him, to kick his legs out, but Whittaker's got this. He's got something here. So what does he do? Tries to come all the way across. Romero tries to go from the back to the side to then get up under him, but it's too late because then he sinks that underhook and Romero can't do anything about it. That saved him right there. He gets it just in time to prevent Romero from getting up underneath him in that particular context. Then he sort of knees him here as they clinch. Romero's trying to dig for underhooks and keep them, and then he just separates there. This is what I mean. He did the same thing every time. He knew exactly what he needed to do to beat Romero's wrestling. They had planned for a number of contingencies, and he made it all work. All right, here they are at distance again, 250. Let's see what happens, right? He's going to fake that left. Now, he does not have lead foot positioning, which is kind of surprising. So let's see what happens. Romero ducks up under it, and this looks tight, man. This looks like he might have him. I mean, again, ear to the hip, shoulders to the hip, hand around the waist, this one around this leg. And look how that's a very deep shot, right? He's going to pick him up and drive him this direction. But here's the interesting part about this. What is Whittaker going to do? He's going to whizzer over this arm, I believe. Let's see. I can't, well, the slides don't really tell you. Hard to tell what happens here. Here's my point. You'll see this later in the fight, too. He goes from having what looked to be like a locked position with his hands, Romero, or locked, not either locked together, but firmly on his body, and then just kind of drops to the bottom of the leg, I think because he knew he couldn't keep him locked down. So he just decided, well, if I can't keep him locked down, let me just go after the leg like a backwards John Smith low single, like that. But that's not enough because Whittaker just slipped out. He did this twice, Romero. Twice. Kind of a weird choice there. I'm not sure why I understand that fully. Minute left in the fourth round. Here they are again. Let's see what happens. Looks like Romero's coming forward. Just comes for a straight shot from distance. Not great. Let's see what Whittaker does. Again, Romero picks up the leg. He wants to block him, send him in this-ish direction. Let's see what he does here. Right? Same thing. See how he jumped from... Look where he was. He's up here. And instead he just switches to the bottom of the leg like this. Now, yes, Whittaker's pushing out, but it almost feels proactive on the part of Romero. So he just limp legs out of it. And there he goes. He's done. He gets out. So by the time the fourth round came, there just wasn't a whole lot on these. But this was the key to everything. Everything, everything, everything. This, to me, is just the most important thing ever. When you think about the wrestling here, when you think about what matters to Robert Whittaker, this is what you need to remember. Hips down. Well, in fact, this one's a little bit better, I suppose. But here we go. This. Base under him, either on his feet or on his knees. Hands here. And if he can't break the hands, he just decides to go to the fence. Because why? Because the fence will give him a chance to get that underhook. And if he's got that underhook, he's got that separation. Boom. Methodical, clinical, brilliant. Fantastic job by Robert Whittaker. You can't out-wrestle a guy who's a better wrestler than you on pure wrestling. But in MMA wrestling, all bets are off, and this is a big, big reason why this guy might be the next big thing in MMA and is already a UFC champ. Last but not least, we take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead. 2 events of note. Of course, there's always more, but 2 events of note to pay attention to. First of all, let's see, UFC, what am I saying? Bellator 181. This will be, they're back, July 14th at the WinStar World Casino in Thackerville, Oklahoma. Your main card includes Brandon Gertz taking on Derek Campos. Valerie Letourneau at women's flyweight is going to take on Emily Ducati Gordinha. That should be a really fun fight. Joe Warren versus Steve Garcia. Kendall Grove versus John Salter. On the prelim card, by the way, Rafael Lovato, I keep saying like he's Brazilian. Rafael Lovato Jr. taking on Mike Biggie Rhodes. Pay attention to that one as well. Plus also Amanda Bell versus Alex Dufresne, and AJ Matthews taking on Andre Fialho. Also on the 16th of July at the SSE Hydro in Glasgow, Scotland, your main card, Gunnar Nelson versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. Great fight that is. Joanne Calderwood versus Cynthia Calvillo. Stevie Ray taking on Paul Felder. Jack Marshman versus Ryan Janes. Khalil Roundtree taking on Paul Bearju Craig. James Mulheron taking on Justin Willis. Then on your prelim card, Danny Roberts versus Bobby Nash. Alexandre Pantoja taking on Neil Seary. Charlie Ward versus Galore Bofando. Danny Henry taking on Daniel Tamer. And then Brett John, your prelim card on Fight Pass, Brett Johns taking on Albert Morales, and Leslie Smith versus Amanda Lemos. And that, of course, will be on Fox Sports 1, except for the 2 fights that are on Fight Pass. If you have any questions, email me at lukethomasnews@gmail.com. Follow me, as you can see below, on Instagram, instagram.com/LukeThomasNews or facebook.com/LukeThomasNews. I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you guys so much, and until next time, enjoy the fights.